February 1st, 1917. Shocking news! The Germans announced that they will begin unrestricted submarine warfare immediately. That means they plan to blow up any ship they want to with their U-boats that sail under the water and shoot missiles. This is very bad. Now everyone is talking war. Mother and Nell even came home early from the picket line. It was the first time in 3 weeks that we all had dinner together. Despite this, it was a very quiet dinner. It was as if there were more unspoken than unspoken. I had the feeling that everyone was having a private conversation with themselves. Father, I imagined, was thinking about treating the wounded. There is a terrible new weapon called mustard gas, and it blinds the soldiers and burns out their lungs or something horrible. So I bet he was thinking about that. And Mother, well, I am not sure what she was thinking, but this cannot help the vigil. Nell behaved very strangely. She had spots of bright color on her cheeks and seemed very nervous. But I think Nell was thinking about joining the ambulance corps. I am sure of it. And I was just thinking about Mother and Father and Nell and what they were thinking about, and about becoming an orphan, more or less. Later. Ha! Told you so. I heard Nell asking Marietta if she could ask Juby's husband Joss, who is the chauffeur for Alma's family, if he would teach her how to drive. We don't have a chauffeur, and Nell would never dream of asking Father. That would give away her plans immediately. February 2nd, 1917. Last night I went to Nell's room and told her outright that I knew her plans. She suddenly looked really scared. Don't tell Mother. What about Father? I asked. But it was Mother she was most concerned with. You see, the Women's Party is against America entering the war. Alice Paul says, why should Americans go and fight for democracy abroad when our president does not defend it at home? Nell doesn't quite agree. She feels that the Great War should be a separate cause from that of suffrage. She says there are actually other women in the party who feel this way too. But not Alice Paul, and not Mother, and not Auntie Claire. I am not sure what I think. It does seem rather silly to be going across the ocean and having young men get killed for democracy, when there is a battle right here, and those poor women are freezing their feet and getting sick. Mrs. Walter Evans collapsed this afternoon on the picket line with pneumonia, and they say her condition is critical. Is she any less brave than a poor Brit blinded by mustard gas? Is her cause less noble? And I know that this is not very nice to say, but what about Nell? Are her ambitions all that noble? Or is she also out looking for adventure and a chance to learn how to drive? I, of course, am feeling very left out of everything. I am too young to be a silent sentinel and stand on the picket line. They allow you only if you are over 21. And nobody cares what I think about the Great War, because why would anyone ever ask a 13-year-old girl? I am fit only to be an orphan. I shall start reading Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist, I guess. February 3rd, 1917. Our country and Germany have officially stopped talking. President Wilson ordered it. And he has also asked for the power to arm all American merchant ships against German U-boats in case of attack. When Mother came home from her shift, she said, well, we're like the Germans now, I suppose, for he hasn't talked to us since we started the vigil. I suppose next he shall ask for the power to take arms against us. I felt as if the breath had been sucked right out of me. As soon as she had said it, she clasped her hands over her mouth. Her eyes went wide at the horror of her own words. She raced across the parlor and folded me into her arms. She tried to comfort me, but I was stiff with fear. Later. Tonight I had not been asleep long when I heard my bedclothes rustle. It was Mother in her nightgown. She was crawling into bed beside me. She put her arms around me and whispered, "Poor cat." Something burst inside me and I started sobbing. The whole bed shook. Mother just said, there, and patted my head. I knew somehow she understood. I am so glad that she did not try to tell me how everyone had to sacrifice in these times, or how noble the cause was. I am sick of noble causes. Good night. February 4th, 1917. Bitter cold this morning. When I woke up, there were frost designs on my window. And when I looked down on Farragut Square, which is directly across from our house, it looked as if the statue of the Admiral, Admiral Farragut, who won the Battle of New Orleans, had been dipped in ice. Everything is glazed. Streets, lampposts, and the back limbs of the trees. The sun is harsh and too bright, and its rays fracture into tiny, brilliant slivers as they hit the ice-sheathed street. A mean wind from the north creaks around the eaves of our house. When I was looking out the window, I saw this tiny figure moving down the street, hunched against the slicing wind, stepping carefully so as not to lose footing. It was Mother! I looked back at my bed. There was still a hollow in the pillow where her head had rested near mine. I don't know when she left my bed this morning, or maybe it was last night. I felt a twinge of shame that I was relieved that she did not speak to me of noble causes. She need not speak. Look how she bends herself into the wind. She is like a small sailing vessel in the vast and stormy sea as she sets her course for the White House to stand sentinel. I suppose the Wilsons are having their morning coffee, and maybe some fancy breakfast rolls. They say there is a very good pastry chef in the White House. I wonder what Mrs. Wilson thinks when she sees these women standing out there, bundled against the cold, their faces wrapped with woolen scarves against the wind. I wonder what they talk about to each other. How could the Wilsons completely ignore the women? Have those people no feelings? How could you as a woman be married to somebody like him, President Wilson? It is not simply that he is against the vote. It is that he can make so small of their cause, that he can go on in his comfort, eating while the women are cold. I think the first requirement to be president should be that the person is human, and the first lady should be also. I would never sit there stuffing my mouth with pastry as good women freeze outside for their natural rights. Later. Made 5 trips to the picket lines today to deliver hot-wrapped bricks and thermoses of coffee. Father joined me on one, but then got an emergency call from the hospital. I found Alma at my house with Clary when I got back from the 3rd trip, and they accompanied me. I think it was good for Clary to go with us and take a brick. She has a hard time understanding what her mother is doing. Auntie Claire was so thrilled to see Clary, and Clary to see Auntie Claire, for often Clary is asleep or with her special tutor at the school she goes to when Auntie Claire returns. They hugged and whooped. Their heads were swallowed up in a cloud of fog from their breath and hollering. It was so cold that their eyes were watering, and then they began to cry. Halfway home I noticed 2 tear tracks had frozen on Clary's cheeks. We brought her inside my house and showed her. She laughed, and when I started to dab them off with a warm towel, she said, "No, no!" Then she cried, and the new warm tears melted the frozen ones. It was so sad, because she was trying to catch them and keep them like one would a souvenir for a scrapbook. We made her some hot chocolate, and I got down my old Mother Goose, which she always seems to like, and began reading her some verses. She seemed fine by this time. Of course, we had to give her many instructions about not telling her father where she had been. She nodded and said, "Shh, no tell Papa," and then would smile shyly. February 5th, 1917. President Wilson made a speech in support of self-government for Puerto Rico. Now the women on the picket lines are making new signs demanding that he look in his own backyard and give women the right to vote. It seems to me that the farther you are from the White House and the more in need of democracy, the better the chance that Wilson will come to your aid. Kind of odd, if you ask me. I went into Nell's room to say goodnight just a few minutes ago, and she was putting up a picture she had gotten of the women's ambulance corps. They were all standing in front of their ambulances somewhere in France in very snappy outfits. They did look good. They wore belted fitted jackets and skirts that buttoned down the front and high boots. I loved their hats, flat on top with a patent leather bill, and they also wore gloves. I guess it's easier to pick up wounded bodies that are slippery with blood if you wear gloves. And the ambulances were modern-looking, tall, boxy vehicles with doors that fold back and big, shiny headlights. It would be heaven to drive one. Oh, and I forgot. The women wear ties just like men do. February 9th, 1917. I hate Uncle Bayard. I think he is the most narrow-minded man I have ever met. Clary has come down with bronchitis. Father is treating her, and Alma and I, and of course Mother and Auntie Claire, are all to blame. He found out about Clary going with us to the picket line. Now he is saying that if it hadn't been for this full women's thing, as he calls the suffrage movement, and stupid silly girls, me and Alma, and even sillier women, Mother and Auntie Claire, his precious Clary, who does not have natural sense, not that we have any more, he says, would not now be at death's door. He blames Auntie Claire most of all, and his words are simply poisonous. Father tried to calm him down. He speaks in such ugly ways. He talked about how poor Clary's brain is deficient, and how there is a medical reason for that. Then he wheeled around and hissed at Auntie Claire and asked what the reason for her brain's weakness was, other than being a woman. Then Father interrupted and told him he couldn't have him talking this way to his wife, especially in front of Alma and me. Uncle Bayard just turned to him and said, "Then I suggest you leave." Father said, "I shall, but I shall return to treat Clary. This is a terrible predicament." February 10th, 1917. Clary does not improve. We are all gripped with the worst fears. Alma said a disturbing thing. She said that her mother, who no longer goes to the picket line, said she thought Uncle Bayard almost wished Clary would die, for it would in some way justify his hatred of women's suffrage. February 11th, 1917. Clary still fares poorly, but Alma reports that she said an astounding thing in her delirium. "Mama," she said, "I'll be coming with a hot brick for you and Auntie Eleanor. Just a minute." I nearly cried when I heard this. Clary's life has always been dull because there are so few things she can do. She doesn't know how to read or write. She cannot really follow games well enough to play. She is rather large and ungainly, and when she tries to dance at parties, she looks sort of funny, so her father has always discouraged her from dancing in public. She has had comfort in her life, but I think very little real joy or any interesting experiences. Carrying those bricks to the picket line for Clary was a real adventure. We did it for a couple days after the first time, and the policemen were so nice to her, and she learned a few of their names and those of the women. February 12th, 1917. I was kept busy today. Nell sent a note to Miss Pruitt's that as soon as I finished school I should rush to the Women's Party headquarters because help was needed. It is all because of Lincoln's birthday, which is today, and the Silent Sentinels have special banners that they are carrying. I had to help finish stitching them up. Mrs. Belmont was there and had a number of her maids with her. Everyone was sewing like crazy. Here is what one said. After the Civil War, women asked for political freedom. They were told to wait, that this was the Negro's hour. The old colored lady, Mrs. Belmont's upstairs maid, stitching next to me on this banner, just snorted. She said softly, "I ain't noticed no Negro hour. I ain't even noticed a Negro minute." I couldn't help but start giggling, and she didn't take offense, thank heaven, but seemed to enjoy that I found this funny. Another banner I stitched on said, "Lincoln stood for women's suffrage 60 years ago, Mr. President. Why do you block the national suffrage amendment today? Why are you behind Lincoln?" When we got the banners finished, I had to run over with them to the picket lines at the White House. Mother was there, and Nell, but not Auntie Claire. She is still trying to keep the peace at home. I really am very fond of Doris Stevens. She has been a friend of Mother's and Father's forever. She always gives me a special wink when I arrive, and today she was standing with Lucy Burns. Miss Burns and Alice Paul have worked together from the time they met in England working for women's rights. They were arrested there several times. Mother calls them some team, but they are quite different in appearance and manner. Lucy is tall with fiery red hair and is always laughing and making jokes. She is all movement, while Alice Paul is all stillness and repose. Lucy called me over and said, "Hey, Kat, want to hear a Valentine's verse I made up for the president?" I went over, and Lucy bent her head close to my ear. A fiery red tendril whipped across my face in the breeze. "Roses are red, violets are pink. President Wilson thinks women's rights stink." "I love it!" I shrieked, and Lucy Burns did a little jig on the sidewalk to keep her feet warm. I made her repeat it so I could tell Alma. February 13th, 1917. Clary is better. We are all so happy, so relieved. I am going over today and taking with me piles of colored paper, paper doilies, and ribbons, and we are going to make valentines with Clary in her sick room. Marietta has baked special little valentines cakes. It will be so much fun. Later. It was fun. Clary wasn't very good at the cutting at first, but we helped her and she actually improved. She loved pasting on the lace trim. Auntie Claire had some very pretty cotton lace left over from some project. We were all having a merry time, decorating valentines and writing verses and eating iced cakes, when Uncle Bayard peeked in. Oh, he was very cheerful and smiled broadly. So happy to see all my little girls doing so well. What a wonderful thing, making valentines. Auntie Claire smiled a funny kind of half-smile, and all I could think was, is this the only way for this man to be pleased with females? I mean, for him to call Auntie Claire a little girl? She is his wife. She is the mother of his 8 children. And Mother says she knows his business as well as he does. I guess this is so if she was threatening to tell Uncle Everett not to invest in the gold mine. February 14th, 1917. Clary has completely recovered, and Auntie Claire was back on the line this afternoon. Alma didn't dare come. She said her father is fuming. He doesn't know what he can do about her mother because she has such a powerful hold over him. Not only with what she knows about the gold mine, but she has also threatened to hire an attorney if she has to get her money out, money that our grandfather left to both Mother and Auntie Claire. But Alma said there is plenty he could do to her. Like what? I asked. Send me to Ashmont. Ashmont is the old Minette plantation down in Maryland, and Alma hates it. Her father's mother lives there. If she were sent there, she might have to have a private tutor. Alma says he's been looking for an excuse to get her out of Miss Pruitt's, which he thinks is too progressive. If she goes to Ashmont, she will be taught to be a fine Southern lady, he says. February 15th, 1917. Snowing and sleeting today, but I wouldn't have missed going to the White House this afternoon. The numbers in the picket line have tripled, and we hear that around the country other states are having similar demonstrations. But today was special. It was Susan B. Anthony's birthday, so there were more people than ever. Alma and I had actually helped work on a special Susan B. Anthony banner for this day. People, thousands of them, stopped and read the words she had spoken during the Civil War. We press our demand for the ballot at this time in no narrow, capacious, or selfish spirit, but from purest patriotism for the highest good of every citizen, for the safety of the Republic. February 16th, 1917. Tonight I was doing my homework. I was having trouble with a math problem. We had to do a problem 2 ways. One way using percentages, and another way using fractions. I am very good at the fraction way, but I really don't understand percentages. I should be getting the same answer either way, but I don't. So I went to Father's study. There was just a little slice of light coming out the door. I heard Mother and Father talking in very low voices. There was a terrible urgency in their tone. I was starting to make out the words, and then one word I heard quite distinctly. Divorce! February 19th, 1917. I have been beside myself with worry. I cannot believe that Mother and Father would divorce. But maybe Father has had enough of Mother and the Silent Sentinels and the picket line and suffrage. I watch them carefully now for any signs. I think perhaps they are not as affectionate as they used to be, although they were never ones for great displays. But every now and then Father would give Mother's shoulder a squeeze, or there would just be a certain look that would pass between them. And here I thought I would wind up being an orphan. But the child of a divorce? They both seem freakish. No one gets divorced. Oh, there was once a girl in Cassie's class at Miss Pruitt's, and her parents were divorced, and she lived with her grandmother because her mother had to work. February 20th, 1917. I can't mention my divorce fears to Alma, because I think she thinks I whine too much. I had told her about my orphan fears, and finally she said I was becoming tiresome. And I can't talk to Nell about it because she is all caught up with the Woman's Party convention that is to happen soon, right around the time of President Wilson's inauguration for his second term, which is to be March 4th. They are planning all sorts of demonstrations. I was supposed to go over to the headquarters and help make banners, but I made an excuse. I play these strange games with myself. When I was walking home from school today, I thought, I shall close my eyes, and when I stop, if I am standing on a sidewalk crack, it means Mother and Father are getting divorced. If I am between, it means they won't. I know it's stupid, but I just can't help myself. February 21st, 1917. Miss Pruitt says I am distracted. She's right, but what am I supposed to say? My mother and father might be getting divorced? She made me stay after school for extra help in math from her sister, Miss Janet. Her name is Pruitt, too, but there can't be 2 Miss Pruitts in one school, so the second one is Miss Janet. Miss Janet helps with the little ones. She smells funny, and she reminds me of an old soggy tea bag. She has about 3 strands of hair on her whole head, and still she wears a hairnet. She wears a locket around her neck, and the rumor among the girls is that she has in it the picture of her fiancé, who was killed in the Civil War. Apparently, Miss Janet is a whiz with percentages. although it's hard to imagine Miss Janet whizzing at anything. She creeps along at a snail's pace, and she brushes every paper 3 times with the palm of her hand before she begins to write. Then she sticks the nib of her pencil on her tongue, and adjusts her spectacles, pats her 3 strands of hair, and finally, in a very creaky voice, begins to explain percentages. But I don't really pay attention. You see, I must sit so close to her that I notice all sorts of other odd things about her. She has a mole with a hair growing out of it on her chin. What a shame! If only that hair could be moved to her scalp. And then her hands are all speckly with purple blotches, and her veins stand out maybe 1/4 of an inch. Although she is quite thin, her feet puff up over the edges of her shoes like balloons. I know this because I dropped my pencil, and when I bent over to pick it up, I was astonished by her feet. It was as if they belonged on another body. Needless to say, my knowledge of percentages was not advanced. February 22nd, 1917. I ate an apple and threw the trash pail in the kitchen when I got home from school today. I thought, if it goes in the pail, Mother and Father are not getting divorced. Well, it didn't go in the pail. It didn't go on the floor either. It hit Marietta square in the chest and went right down her dress. She was just walking through. Good Lord, did she squawk. Well, that did it. I started bawling my eyes out. "What's wrong with you, child?" She came up and put her arms around me. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" But I couldn't even get the words, or the word out. Finally I did. "Divorce," I sputtered. "Who's getting a divorce, child?" "Mother and Father," I gulped. And then everything just rushed out, and I mean everything. About being an orphan, my problem with percentages, and how I hated having to work with Miss Janet, and the mole with the hair and the feet like balloons. About Nell and the stupid ambulance corpse. Finally Marietta blew the air out through her lips so hard that they made a funny vibrating noise. Prip. "Honey, it ain't your folks that be getting divorced." She said this with such soreness in her voice that it made me stop my blubbering. She pushed me back a little in her arms, and I looked straight into her face. "Who is it?" I asked. "If anybody, it may be your Auntie Claire. It ain't for sure they be doing it, but you be done overheard, and I guess you done overheard your mama and daddy talking, right?" I nodded slowly. I felt the strangest mixture of sensations. Relief, naturally, but then oddness. It was so odd. And then it hit me. Poor Alma! And here I had been whining to her all the while about being an orphan, and complaining about Nell and the ambulance corpse. How will Auntie Claire and Uncle Bayard ever get divorced? What will happen to all those little babies in Clary? I think I have been very selfish to be so concerned with my own fears. But now how can I bring this up with Alma? I mean, I am sure I am not supposed to know, and maybe Alma doesn't know. I just don't understand why life has to be so complicated, and I certainly can't believe that on the first page of this diary, a mere 6 weeks ago, I said that my life was so dull I wouldn't have anything to write about. Well, it's not as if my life is tremendously exciting, but I sure do have a lot to write about. February 23rd, 1917. Alma and I went to the Ardmore and finally had our banana split. When Alma and I eat a banana split together, we do it perfectly. I know that sounds stupid, but we just know how to eat one together. No one gets piggy and tries to hog all the sauce. Alma knows that I like to eat the banana part first, and then get to the ice cream. So she never invades my ice cream territory. See, we're just so close we know without speaking how to behave toward each other in the most civilized manner. It is no work being with Alma. It is only friendship, and it is as easy as rowing down a quiet, still river on a summer day. When Alma and I grow up and are real young ladies, we are going to make a grand tour of Europe together, if there's anything left after the war. We have already started working on the itinerary. February 24th, 1917. Father has come home in a complete dither from his men's club. We shall read all about it in the paper tomorrow, he says. The British have intercepted a coded message between the Germans and the Mexicans. The Mexicans had offered bases to German submarines on the coast of Mexico, on the shores of our continent. This is too close. It is almost as if I can smell the mustard gas. Nell won't even have to go abroad to join the ambulance corps, just south of the border. It is so scary. Father says the president is hopping mad. The coded message is called the Zimmerman telegram, and it will be published in the paper in the next few days. This really is starting to look like war. My worries about orphandom, for lack of a better word, are taking a back seat to being blinded by mustard gas or blown up by a bomb. February 25th, 1917. Father came home with the evening paper. There it was in the headlines in the biggest, blackest letters I've ever seen. Mexico swaps U-boat bases for Texas in deal with Germans. British intelligence breaks code of Zimmerman telegram. Mother and Nell were still on the picket line, but Alma was spending the night. I couldn't believe it, but Uncle Bayard let her because she convinced him I needed help with percentages for a math test tomorrow, and I will help her with Latin. It was a different evening. We did very little studying, but Father seemed happy for the company. He invited us into his study. We discussed the Zimmerman telegram. He says it is unbelievable that the Kaiser would presume to offer such a deal to the Mexican government. How could they simply give away a state of ours? I don't understand it. Well, that means war, Father said very calmly, looking at Alma and me with his steady dark eyes. My lips moved around the words, but no sound came out. I so much wanted to ask a question, but I couldn't make my mouth do it. Finally, in a small voice I did not even recognize, I muttered, "Father, must you go to war?" He couldn't hear me. Then Alma spoke up very clearly and told him I was worried to death about his going away to war to be a doctor, and then with Aunt Eleanor still on the picket line, I would be orphaned. "Cat!" Father exclaimed. Then he rushed to assure me that first of all he is too old to be called up to go to the Great War. He had already been called in the event of war to help train the younger doctors at hospitals in Washington, D.C. and Maryland because of his experience in the Spanish-American War. He convinced me I wouldn't be orphaned, but he said my mother will still be on the picket line. And Alma's too. It is a noble cause, even though it is an inconvenient one. Father snorted. There was this long silence that seemed to widen into a huge gulf, and I suddenly knew with absolute certainty that we were all thinking about the same thing. Uncle Bayard. His name hung in the air as big and bold as the letters in the headlines. "I wish," Alma said in a soft but steady voice, "my father could be like you, Uncle Alfred." All the light went out of Father's eyes, and he suddenly seemed old and tired. He paused a long time. "I want you to know, Alma, that come what may, you shall always have a place here in this house." I looked first to Father, and then to Alma. They were locked in each other's gaze. I knew in that moment that it was true. Her parents would get divorced. I think Alma is the bravest person I know. Later, Alma and I talked all night long. She said she had been longing to tell me about the divorce, although it is not for sure. I feel so stupid about how I have been all wrapped up in myself, worrying about being an orphan. I honestly think she did not want to tell me because she considers me too immature. And she's right. She says her worst fear is that she and her younger siblings will be sent to Ashmont, her grandparents' plantation in Maryland. But she says she will run away before that. I told her she has only to run away to here. She says she doesn't think her father will ever let her move in here. We are too Yankee for him. It is true that a lot of my family come from Boston, but some people, such as Uncle Bayard, just never have gotten over the Civil War. February 27th, 1917. Everybody is getting quite excited in anticipation of the president's inauguration for his second term. The Women's Party is planning some sort of big demonstration. Women from all over are coming for a convention right before the inauguration, barely a week away on March 4th. Mother is quite busy because I guess they will be doing big things for the inauguration. Mother is on the special board to plan these activities, but not Auntie Claire. Nell said that would be the straw that broke the camel's back, meaning Uncle Bayard would split in two, I suppose, if his wife were on such a board. So I asked her about the divorce. I couldn't believe it. Nell's jaw dropped in utter shock. Nell tends to have a kind of know-it-all look, but now her face was blank, and those fierce dark eyes of hers just open wide. "You didn't know?" I was stunned. I have never known anything my older sisters, Cassie and Nell, didn't. It felt terrific. You cannot imagine how awful it is being so much younger. You never get let in on anything. Yes, there are definite problems with being the youngest. but I had promised myself that I would not be so selfish in my thoughts and dwell on my misfortunes. As long as I am not orphaned and there is no divorce in my family, I count myself lucky. February 28th, 1917. For Our Eyes Only Diary, I am announcing right now that I plan to be sick tomorrow. Miss Pruitt says one more session with Miss Janet, and I should be set with percentages. I say one more session with Miss Janet, and I will either be asphyxiated from her mothy ball smell, or bored to death, or have more bad dreams about her mole with the hair. Father has to go to Maryland very early tomorrow. I can use this ruse only when he is away, because, after all, he is a doctor. But I plan to start it tonight. I shall begin to complain of a headache after dinner. Then I have my own private hot water bottle, and if I time it right and fill it with hot water and put it on my brow for 5 minutes, I will feel damp and sweaty when Mother comes to kiss me good night. She will then run downstairs to get Father. It will take her at least 4 minutes to come back with him, and I will have a few more minutes of hot water bottle application. Then Father will come in and touch my head and feel my glands. I actually have a way of swallowing and holding air in the back of my throat that makes them seem a teeny tiny bit swollen. It is an art that Alma and I have developed. Then he will go and get a thermometer. It of course will register normal, because I won't have had a chance to work my wonders on it yet. I can do that only when he is away. But Father will furrow his brow and say, "She might be coming down with something." Music to my ears. In the morning, when Father is gone, I shall complain bitterly of a headache and scratchy throat. I will not actually say scratchy. I find it is more effective to say dry, or dusty, or sometimes sandy. Of course, more work with the hot water bottle will be needed. I will be absolutely clammy by the time Mother arrives with the thermometer. Now when Mother sticks a thermometer in my mouth, she always says, "Be right back." Then she goes to make phone calls or instruct Marietta. Needless to say, by the time she has returned, I will have managed to stick the thermometer under scalding hot water in the bathroom, so it reads at least 100 degrees. But Mother keeps me home if it is 99. So that is the plan. I shall rest comfortably in bed, avoid Miss Janet, and might even practice my percentages. Anything not to ever see those balloon feet and the hairy mole and be engulfed in the mothball smell.